Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Gartner Digital Markets webinar hosted by myself, Stanzie Cote, and John Leake. This is specifically to discuss sales follow-up, basically the difference between a new customer and a lost opportunity. So we'll dive right in. So this is me. I'm Stanzie Cote. I'm the Senior Client Success Partner at Gartner Digital Markets. I've been with Software Advice for almost 4 years, and I actually began as an advisor. So I was a member of the team that actually qualified all the leads that you guys have been getting.
And I am John Leake. I am on the business development team with Gartner Digital Markets. Prior to this, I had digital marketing and corporate sales roles at Amazon and at Major League Soccer. So I've sold a lot of things in my career to a lot of different people, and really excited to be helping Stanzie out today.
Great, so just to kind of quickly go over what we'll be covering today. The first part of it is just to go over, the basics. Why is lead follow-up important? The second part is just to discuss some basic best practices that you guys might be doing, might not be doing, how to overcome some specific lead follow-up challenges that we encounter a lot on this end of the things, some advanced tips and tricks that you might not be thinking about yet, and some helpful tools and apps that we use in our own internal sales teams that have really proved to be beneficial. The main goal that we wanted to cover with this webinar is to empower your sales team so they're fully engaged with our leads and have a really high success rate with the buyers we qualify. At Software Advice, we worked with over 1,000 vendors, and Capterra has tons of vendors as well. We've all received different kinds of feedback on our leads, and we know what works and what doesn't when it comes to following up.
Cool. So this slide asks a pretty obvious question with some pretty obvious answers, but I think it's worth repeating to any sales organization or any marketer. The saying that we always use at Gartner is that time kills deals. You have a great conversation with somebody, and then a month later you're having the same conversation again with them because you didn't harness the momentum coming off of a really good call, or marketing passed a really good lead off to sales didn't follow up promptly, and then the lead isn't scored as well as we want it to be. So lead follow-up is important because it helps us execute that handoff from marketing to sales. It's an area where we see a lot of our clients, and I know a lot of sales organizations industry-wide, find a lot of their pipeline is at risk. The reason is, marketing typically isn't fluent in what sales does. They just kind of know sales as these people on the other side of the room or the other side of the office that are on the phone all the time. Sales isn't really fluent in what marketing's process is. They don't typically know all of the resources and time that goes into recruiting leads, scoring pipeline before they get handed off to sales. And the result is we've got a loss of dollars on both sides and increased frustration from both teams. I know that one of the biggest scenarios or most common scenarios that Stanzie and I hear when we're talking to clients on the phone is if I'm talking to a marketing person, I know they're going to say, I'm giving sales great leads and they're not doing anything with it. And if I'm talking to sales, they're going to say, we've got a really great marketing team and they're just not sending us good leads. There's nothing there. So our data says literally every second counts. The longer we wait to call, the less chance there is someone's going to pick up. At Software Advice, we've got this process down to minutes. So knowing that that's important, we're going to focus on lead follow-up.
Great, so what we'll do is basically, sorry about that guys, technical difficulty. What we'll do is go over a few of the things that we do on the Software Advice side. This applies to basically all leads, but speaking from Software Advice experience, one of the main things that we do on this end is, as an advisor, we call an average of 80 plus times per day, and that applies across markets. When I was an advisor, I made between 80 to 130 calls per day and called each of the kind of leads that converted on our site at least 4 to 5 times per day. That's definitely aggressive, but the main thing to take away from that is that we call within seconds, so we minimize that turnaround time as fast as we possibly can. For most vendors, calling within minutes or hours is pretty doable. And having an inside sales team that isn't afraid to be fairly assertive and calling as many times as they can and following up with emails is really important. The next point here, obviously, is follow up every call with an email. That doesn't mean every single call you make to an individual, but in the span of a day, I would, as an advisor, call one person probably 4 to 5 times each day. And at the end of that day, I would either leave a voicemail or send an email kind of summing up why I was trying to reach them. One good cadence to follow here is if you don't leave a voicemail, send a longer email trying to explain why you're trying to get them on the phone. If you did leave a voicemail, just send a brief email that kind of references things. The last thing here to really keep in mind is it's always helpful on both sides to be more assumptive and don't really ask for permission. If you give someone an out and ask them a yes or no question of, can I call you tomorrow, or, can I shoot you an email, you're basically giving them permission to say no. A better way to do this is to just ask what time is best, what works for you. Give them the ability to manage their day and you can respect their time, but asking a yes or no question just leaves it open for an automatic no on the other side.
Cool. So this next slide just talks about what to do when you get someone on the phone. And the best practice that we have is just a little shorthand that we call review preview. What this basically means is any touch point that I have with a lead, I want to know what I did before and what I'm planning to do on this call, and I want to reference that with every touch point. So, for example, tell them what came before, why you're calling them now, and what happens after that. Go back one. Oh, we got our slides out of order. Hang on, we're here. We got fat fingers today on the slides. We were talking about review preview. So an example of this is if I've got a lead that's qualified to me, I can say, hey, I saw that you qualified. Marketing said you downloaded this white paper. I'm going to go over these next steps with you here. And then you could also do the same thing with an email. I saw you downloaded this form on our website. Wanted to answer any further questions that you might have. And every call, every email, whether you're on the phone or talking to a voicemail, it's important to say, here's who I am, here's why I'm calling you today, here's what I'm going to do on this call or this email, and then here's what we're going to do next time. Structuring your calls that way, one, gives the sales rep confidence to know where the call or the email is going, and also tells the buyer that you're not wasting their time and that you're prepared.
So the next thing that we're covering here is just basic best practices for a voicemail. One thing that we're trying to convey here is that an effective format is leaving a voicemail that's under a minute long, preferably under 45 seconds. So this is an example of one that we think is really effective.
Yeah, and generally speaking, everyone knows when we look at voicemails on our own phones, I will see if it's over a minute on my iPhone, I'm not listening to that voicemail. That's really long. I'm going to say, hey, if it's that important, they'll just call back. The other thing is if a voicemail is only 4 or 5 seconds, I'm also going to delete that one because it's like, oh, they probably just called and hung up. So a really good window to set for voicemails is about 30 to 45 seconds. This is actually something that sales managers and sales teams and marketing leaders can practice. When I was really young in sales, starting out my career, I would leave myself fake voicemails and just see how long it was. Something that I think is 30 seconds, maybe a minute and 20 seconds, it also maybe only 20 seconds. It also lets you hear how fast you're talking. A lot of salespeople have a tendency when they leave a voicemail, especially if it's scripted, to read through it very quickly. Not a great buyer experience. Sales rep sounds nervous. So these are techniques you can practice. So we like to target under 45 seconds, and then a really, really basic format. If you have voicemail scripting already in your sales organization, this is going to seem remedial to you, but we find a lot of people don't put this type of effort in, and it's really useful to just sit down and say, every time I leave a voicemail, I want it to do this. So always start with your full name and your company name. Going back to the review preview slide earlier, let the buyer know why you're calling. And then I always close with my first name again and give my phone number twice. The reason is I just assume that people are as careless as I am all the time and never have a pin lying around. And if I hear a voicemail from somebody, even if it's someone I want to talk to, and they only leave their phone number once in the middle, I've already forgotten it, and I'm like, well, I hope they call me back later because I don't want to go back and listen to that voicemail again. But if you leave a phone number twice, they can say, oh yeah, that John guy from Software Advice, what was he saying? Let me grab a pen. He said his phone number. I didn't get it in time. All right, I've got my pen now. Oh good, he said it again. That's really helpful. You know, and at the very beginning, if you have a young sales team or an experienced sales team, scripting voicemails can be really helpful. I'm going to give you guys an example just real quick. So, you know, I may call Stanzie, who's a lead of mine who wants me to help out with a webinar, and I would just go something like this. So call, expecting to talk to her on the phone. She's not going to answer. She doesn't answer. I know I'm going to send her an email follow-up as soon as I get off the phone, so I'll leave a voicemail that goes something like this. Hey Stanzie, this is John Leake with Software Advice. The reason for my call today is I know that you had reached out asking for some help planning that webinar you wanted to do the other day. You were specifically looking for some really good music to listen to before you got online. I'd love to share that with you. I've got some really good ideas. I've got a great Spotify playlist I think would be perfect for you. Give me a call back when you can. Again, it's John from Software Advice. My number is 512-234-4535. Again, 512-234-4535. I'll send an email as well. Really look forward to speaking with you. Thanks so much. And something like that is, you know, really basic, really useful. You're not going to close a deal through a really great voicemail. No one's ever said, like, that was an awesome voicemail. I can't wait to buy from this guy. But you can do a lot to show your professionalism and your preparedness to buyers, and you can do some things to increase the rate at which you get called back.
Great, so moving on to one of the main lean challenges that we get on our side that we definitely hear a lot from vendors is running into gatekeepers. One thing that we really we dub an advisor as being a black belt advisor when they get really good and adept at encountering gatekeepers and receptionists. And I know your sales team probably runs into this as well. So a few key things to keep in mind here is, one, to be honest and upfront, but also firm. Be completely transparent with the receptionist. Let them know why you're calling, but also be honest. Tell them that you're going to keep calling if they can't put you through today. And 9 times out of 10, they'll at least be able to give you a little bit more information. Maybe the buyer that you're trying to reach is never in the office that you have the number for, and you basically just need to call a different location. Maybe that you have the wrong number and you're trying to get through to the wrong extension. You'll never know unless you tell the receptionist why you're calling and being a bit firm and honest about how often you're going to be planning on reaching out. The next point here is to express the active engagement that's already happened from the person you're calling. So what I mean by this is, at least on the software advice side, when we send you a lead, we've already spoken to the person you're trying to reach. We're already being clear about why they needed to hear from you. We're always honest about when they're, like, what they're looking for, what their needs are. Don't be afraid to reference that with the receptionist. Say, you know, John filled out a form on our site, and that's why I'm reaching out. This is, this is what we do. This is what we take care of. Or John actually talked to Ryan from Software Advice, and he told us that he was looking for a call today. When can I call back? That's a great way of kind of being adept on the phone, being completely honest with why you're calling, but also being firm in the idea that you belong there and you have a responsibility to that person. Another thing that we get a lot from receptionists is a lot of receptionists kind of fall into an automatic mode of offering to take a message for whatever person they're being a gatekeeper for. A great way to encounter this is say, yeah, I would love to leave a message. Please put me through to their voicemail. That ensures that you're going to leave a message on their line. The gatekeeper isn't going to screen anything else for you. And it might be a case where they put you through and you actually get on the phone with that person. They're actually in their office. So you end up getting on the phone instead of leaving a voicemail. When you do get back on the phone with the buyer, you actually do get through. A great way to get brownie points here is reference how helpful the receptionist was. 9 times out of 10, they're just doing their job. They're being upfront and being the gatekeeper that they were hired to be, and telling the buyer something like, you know what, John was super helpful by screening my calls and getting me to you in the right way and being, responsible with your time. I really appreciate it. You need to let him know he did an awesome job. The last kind of thing to reference here is that one thing that our advisors do, and that I did when I was an advisor, is try calling before you think the receptionist is there. It's kind of a last-ditch effort here, but sometimes when you call at like 7:30 a.m. local time, the buyer trying to reach might already be in their office and the receptionist might not be there yet. You might reach them before that gatekeeper gets there. So that's another kind of last-ditch tip that might actually work to your advantage.
Cool, and something that we run into sometimes is we'll talk to sales organizations, we'll talk to sales leaders, we'll talk to marketing leaders, and maybe some of you right now are feeling this way, saying, hey, what happens when I'm doing everything right? I feel like I'm just doing a lot of this. My voicemails are good. We do all of this great. Role play with our sales teams. Marketing does a good job of sending us leads over, but a lot of times people just don't respond. This happens. We've got some statistics at Software Advice that suggests that we qualify on about 10% of our phone calls, which means 90% of the time we're leaving voicemails or sending emails. It just means that when you do get somebody on the phone, you need to do the best that you can to make sure that you qualify that lead and convert them and build them into an opportunity that you can add to your pipeline. It also means that there's a lot of work that feels like it's not going anywhere, and you don't really know that all of your sales outreach is working until they say, yeah, send me a demo, or I'd like to schedule a demo, send me a proposal over. So what we say is, be first. So if someone comes to, let's say we're at a marketing event, and I know that I've spoken to a buyer, but they're probably walking around talking to a few of my different competitors, or I'm buying leads from a lead gen channel or doing white paper syndication, it's likely that you're not the only person in the hunt. It's important to call quickly. If a lead qualifies on Tuesday morning, don't wait until Friday afternoon to call them. If marketing says, hey, this is a hot lead, give them a call them right away. I might stop what I'm doing just to send a quick email and say, hey, wondering if you have time for a demo this afternoon. The other thing is be consistent, live up to your deadlines. If you say, I'm going to follow up this email with a call Wednesday morning, call Wednesday morning, don't call Thursday afternoon. If you say, I'm going to send you an email right after this voicemail, send the email. Someone may hear that in a voicemail, delete the voicemail because they expect an email to come through, and then they're looking at their phone or they're on their computer like, wait, where's my email? This guy said he was going to send an email over. 30 minutes later, they go on to something else. And you've lost that momentum you have. And then to Stanzie's previous point, get creative. I used to like to call gatekeepers between 1 and 2 local time. The reason is if you're important enough to have an administrative assistant or a gatekeeper, somebody to screen your calls, you're probably going out to lunch a lot, which means you don't want to schedule calls right at 1 o'clock. Most people in our company are out of the office from 11:30 to 1. Very few people like calls at 1 o'clock. They'll schedule their first call at 1:30 or 2. The smart people in the audience may have noticed that this webinar was scheduled for 2 p.m. Eastern because none of us wanted to be on the phone at 1 p.m. Eastern. So, I'll call between 1 and 2, see if I can get, my C-level person or my marketing director before they're in their afternoon calls and their afternoon meetings. So that's what to do with unresponsive buyers. Know that they're there. Have some confidence that your marketing team isn't sending you bad leads. Have some confidence that your efforts are working. Know that it's going to pay off eventually. The second thing that we see a lot in the sort of unresponsive or confused buyers. So this is something that we specifically see with Software Advice. If you're a Software Advice client, you've probably had some buyers who seem a little bit confused when you call. This is just human nature to say, man, who was that guy I talked to a week ago? I don't remember. Yeah, I don't remember filling out, or I didn't do anything on that website. I didn't put anything on that website. I didn't click anything. I've never heard of Capterra before. I didn't click on that website and fill out information on your website when I got there. The reason people do this is because they don't want to be sold. No one likes to talk to a salesperson. No one likes to feel like they're being pushed. And most of our skilled salespeople aren't pushy. But the sales profession does have a bit of that reputation. So it's just really easy to be frustrated and say, why is this person lying to me? Why is this guy pretending like I didn't call him? And say, hey, I understand I had a really busy week last week too. you were on Capterra.com. Do you remember going to Capterra? Do you remember clicking around in that accounting directory? There's a big orange button. I mean, my marketing team wouldn't have sent me this information if you didn't fill out this information on your website. Maybe somebody went in and filled it out for you. Sounds like there's someone on your team who is trying to nudge you and say that you need to be paying attention to this kind of stuff. But again, just trust that a lead doesn't qualify from marketing to sales for no reason, right? There's a reason that that person got to you. There's a reason that they're asking to be called. Maybe it's less urgent today than it was last week. You can say, you may not be feeling it right now, but obviously something prompted you to, click on a form on our website and fill out some information. What was that? What was going on last Tuesday, that really had you feeling a sense of urgency about wanting to get some more information? Similar to that is buyers with delayed searches. This also happens, business is constantly changing, budgets are changing, budgets need to get approved and reapproved regularly. There's been a number of times where we've seen someone qualify through our website who a software advice client will call and say, yeah, you told me that they were ready to buy within 3 months, and they told me that they're ready to buy within 9 months. 99 times out of 100, that buyer will qualify back through software advice within 90 days. It happens all the time, and this is true of most lead channels and most lead generation channels as well. Someone says they have a delayed search, that doesn't mean that they stopped looking. Maybe we change our sales touch points from once a day to twice a week. Maybe we go email only for a while, or maybe we say, hey, let's schedule a call for a month out. I don't want to waste your time today, but you're still going to need to get budget approved. You're still going to want to know how much these solutions cost. Let me put a demo together for you. That way, in a couple of months, when we get back in the groove of buying and you're back in the process of researching, you already have a proposal put together. You already know how much we're going to cost, and you can actually get budget approved around that if you think we're the solution for you. And then the final thing on this slide is just make sure you're calling people at the right time. If someone says, don't call me before lunch, don't call them before lunch. If your office is in California and the buyer is in Miami, Florida, don't call them at 3 p.m. local time, because that's 6 p.m. East Coast time, and they're already at home in their sweatpants watching Netflix. The inverse is also true. If you're an East Coast company with West Coast leads, you probably want to call all of those buyers at the end of the day, or sometimes you may have to work through lunch, because if you want to catch them at 9 a.m. In San Francisco, you're going to want to be calling them at 11 a.m. in Chicago. So it's important to remember that person is not on your schedule. The lead that you're calling has a different life. Be respectful of their time, and be cognizant of where they are in the country, sort of how their geography works out and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and the nice thing there on that point is that we try to provide that information in our leads as software advice. So definitely empower your sales team to use those notes to their advantage. So this is getting into a little bit of a miscellaneous tips and tricks area of the webinar here. But one thing that we've seen to work really well on this end, we actually, it happened recently with one of our more senior advisors, is asking for a different point of contact. So this could help in the receptionist scenario, but also just calling into a department or something like that where you're not getting to who you need to get to. Try asking, so you're saying something like, who else is helping with this? Ryan asked more information and I'm having trouble reaching him. That could lead to all kinds of different things, but one thing that happened recently was one of our advisors called and kept trying to call this particular buyer who converted on our site, wasn't having any luck, called more than 20 times, finally asked the receptionist who else might be helping with this, and ended up getting transferred to the director of HR, who was actually in charge of the search to begin with. So it ended up working really well, and I definitely recommend you doing that if you keep hitting a wall.
And then we touched on this a little bit earlier when we were talking about gatekeepers. If you've got a really great lead, we're talking about CTO, CIO, CEO, the person I know who controls the budget, the person I know who, if I can get their buy-in, I'm going to have a closed deal in my hand. It's important to remember that usually these people have a little bit of, I don't want to say arrogance, but there's always a healthy ego in the C-suite. There's always a healthy sense of self-confidence. Just a quick story, I have a friend of mine who works as a CFO for a small oil and gas company, and he straight up told me that he let a sales rep take him to lunch one time because the guy referenced a quote that he had made in the Wall Street Journal. And I said, Jake, that's very you. Like, I'm not surprised to hear you say it. He's like, he's like, I gave the quote. All you had to do was Google my name, And there I was, and he had done that. He had done some research. So if I'm the kind of salesperson who's going to Google somebody before I call them to see what I can find out about them, I'm probably also the kind of salesperson or the kind of organization that's going to be digging deeper when I'm trying to solve their software problems. Google searches are a really good way to turn up results, but things like keynotes that they've made at industry conferences, maybe they were in a TED Talk, maybe they've got a quote, out in a newspaper somewhere. You can get creative with C-suites. If those are usually very powerful leads, and they do justify a little bit of an additional effort to sort of customize that message to them. We're always talking about tailoring when we talk to the sales teams at Gartner. And know who you're talking to, know what their priority is. We say people buy for their reasons, not for your reasons. So if I know it's important to somebody, I can tailor my message a little bit. You never want to outright lie to somebody. That's not what we're saying to do, but understand what's important to them and speak to that as much as possible. This also ties into things that marketing can do even in the lead nurture phase. So before they ever get to sales, there's nothing wrong with vendor-specific collateral. If I've got a really high-value company that I'm going after, let's take some time to build some custom collateral for them. Let's include, links to articles about them. Let's reference in emails that we know about an article that they read. Were they in a Gartner Magic Quadrant? Hey, saw that you were a leader, in this recently. Would love to talk more about that. Or, hey, I was reading this industry publication, and you guys closed that big deal. Wanted to see what's changed for you there. Just these are sort of generic examples, but opportunities to tailor your message to them specifically, again, goes a long way to showing that you're ready to be a very serious partner with them, and that you can handle the uniqueness of their business. Everyone likes to think that their business is special. Everyone likes to think that they're the only one in the world with their problems. The reality is, as I'm sure salespeople will tell you and marketing people will tell you, we hear the same complaints and the same challenges from a lot of our vendors and a lot of our leads in the world. The other thing is just to be confident. Again, this goes back to what I was saying earlier about being patient when you're talking to somebody. If you're a marketing person, trust that your sales team is going to follow up properly if you send them good leads. Don't sit around thinking about how lazy the sales team is. If you're a salesperson, trust that marketing would not have wasted a lot of the company's money to send you buyers that are no good. If they're getting to you, these are the best. Salespeople want perfect sales leads, and marketing wants perfect salespeople. Neither exists. But know that they're doing the best work that they can, right? So have confidence. And if you're a sales manager or a sales leader, you can say, hey, I'm in these meetings. I know what marketing is doing. I know where they're spending their money. These are the leads that we're getting. These are the best leads we've gotten, especially if they're a Capterra lead. I mean, just think about the effort that someone has to go through to qualify through Capterra. They've got to type something into Google. They've got to click on a link to a website they've never heard of. And then they've got to click on your profile, get to your website, and fill out a form. That's a lot of intent. You don't do that accidentally. That's really good. I used to have a basketball coach in high school who says no one accidentally becomes Michael Jordan. You work really hard at it. So if a buyer is converting through a channel like Capterra, that is more front of funnel lead, that's some confidence we can relate to our sales team. Look at this program we're involved in. Look at all this money that we're spending, and then you can go to the sales teams and let them know to have confidence in the marketing team's efforts and in the product that the engineers and everybody is building. And then Stanzie has a really great story that I can't do justice about a software advice lead that was called, converted, and qualified via text.
Right, so we've actually started doing this more and more in the advisor team, and it's been pretty exciting to see unfold. But essentially, one thing that our medical advisors specifically run into a lot of is encountering doctors who convert on our site, ask for a call, and then are pretty much impossible to reach because they're always in, patient appointments, maybe ORs. There's a lot of reasons why doctors are pretty difficult to get on the phone. But what they've started to do is text. So we always have a phone number and an email address whenever a buyer converts on software advice. And typically what the kind of the medical advisors have been able to do is get on the phone with a gatekeeper and schedule a time with the doctor. And this can be valid for any market, but medical specifically is a little bit tough. So what a couple of advisors have gotten pretty adept at is texting the doctor to see when a good time is to actually chat. And what we've seen is that when the doctor responds, it usually is a really appreciative response. Like, oh my gosh, Thank you for texting me. You guys have been calling all day. I'm so sorry. I'm in and out of the office all the time. Yes, let's talk today at 4 o'clock. All of my appointments are over then, and we can definitely have like an uninterrupted conversation. A great example of this is one of our medical advisors actually did this after calling 22 times to this doctor's office and having no luck. He texted the doctor, got a call later that day, and had a qualification and sent that lead to 5 vendors. So it's one of those things where you have to be persistent and creative, but texting is becoming more and more of a way to make a connection, and I definitely encourage your sales team to try that out if they think they have a mobile line that will work on. So give that a shot. And then going into a few of the tools that I referenced at the beginning of the webinar. So combined across Capterra and software advice sales teams, I think we use all of these nowadays, but the first one is pretty ubiquitous nowadays, Calendly. I know our business development team at Software Advice has a Calendly link in each of their signatures. It basically, if you're not familiar with it, it's an example of one of those calendar apps that essentially allows people to put time on your calendar without having to have the back and forth via email to figure out a good time. They can see your availability, they can put time on your calendar, and then you can go from there. Reportive is another thing that our biz dev team uses. It's a LinkedIn plugin that populates contacts in your email account, like complete with titles, the location of their business sometimes, a picture of the person you're contacting. So it basically kind of embeds that LinkedIn information directly into your email. Another really helpful thing is HubSpot Sales. This just turned into HubSpot Sales. It was formerly called Sidekick. Essentially, it helps you track when your emails are opened. So you can see, oh, I just emailed this person 2 days ago. They're finally opening my message. It can kind of, depending on how assertive you want your sales team to be, that can be a red flag for them to call that person right away. They know that they're reading that email. They know that they're kind of thinking about that conversation. Give them a call when you see them open that message so you can start that conversation over the phone and get the ball rolling. Another really helpful thing that I think Capterra uses to really great effect is Yesware. It essentially schedules emails to be sent out in the right time zone of the buyer, which is super valuable for international contacts, especially when you're having a hard time figuring out when they're going to be in the office, what time is best to make sure your message is at the top of their inbox. And one last thing that I know that Capterra uses a lot of is Hunter.io. It is really helpful to figure out what email addresses might be usable at a particular company. So if you type in a domain name into Hunter.io, it'll tell you what possible email addresses are there from a specific company in case you're having a hard time reaching your contact. It's a great way to try to figure out if you can get someone else to speak to you about a particular sales opportunity. It's also a good way to see if the email address that isn't working for a buyer, maybe you have something as small as a typo, but also if you're having a hard time reaching a buyer on the email address we gave you, maybe using Hunter.io will spit out a different format that works better. And then the last one is working with your marketing department to handle marketing automation software subscriptions. So Marketo, Pardot, HubSpot, all of those are valid MA tools to help you with your follow-up when somebody needs to be nurtured, for example, like John mentioned before. Maybe they have a delayed search. Marketing automation software is really helpful to make sure that your product stays on that buyer's kind of radar, so when they do come back to the marketplace, they're ready to go and they're aware of your product. They don't need to be resold. They can just sign up. So getting into some of the stats that we've seen on the software advice side, I thought these would just be helpful to share because I think they're valid for pretty much all sales teams. But on our end, we've seen that as little as 1% of buyers actually call back when they say they do. So this is to put it into perspective. We've all heard this, right? You call a buyer, they say, "Oh yeah, I'll call you right back," and then your sales team needs to be aware that there's only a 1% chance that that will actually happen. Another thing that John briefly mentioned before is that we tend to qualify roughly, it takes us about 10 calls to get someone on the phone and qualify them. There are several leads that never go anywhere on our end. We can't really do anything with, but on average it takes us about 10 tries to get someone on the phone successfully and qualify them. Like I said before, advisors make anywhere between 70 to 150 plus calls per day. We did have some rockstar advisors who made almost 200 calls a day, but on average we tend to stick between the 100 to 130 range for most days. And then to put it in perspective, we tend to call a ratio to email, call to email of 8 to 1. So roughly every one email has about 8 calls attached to it for that particular buyer. And then at Capterra, something that they do on their end is, regardless of territory, whenever a lead comes in, a sales lead comes in, everyone on that sales team is notified. That helps make sure that there's coverage. It helps make sure that no matter who it is, they're contacted within a few minutes, not hours, but minutes, and that they're all taken care of. Everyone on the sales team is aware when a new opportunity is in front of them. The last thing that I'll hand off to John is one thing that we've started doing at Software Advice, which should be applicable to all sales teams, is including managerial oversight for deleted leads. So if you can go into that, John.
Yeah, this is a bullet point that was going to be like 12 bullet points, and I just said just put managerial oversight, and I'll just talk about it. But what this basically means is, we talk about having a plan for each lead when marketing hands it to sales. And then sales is going to follow up on it, right? One of the questions we get is, at what point do I give up? At what point do I say, hey, this person is, no longer a qualified lead. This person is not ready for a sales call. I'm going to send them back to the marketing nurturing stream, or, I'm just going to get rid of them altogether. Maybe they say, hey, no thanks. I'm actually going to go with a competitor or whatever. We want to sort of know how this process is being handled on the management side for 2 reasons. Number one, it's a really great source of data. So marketing leaders and sales leaders, I would say it's important to connect, maybe quarterly, and just talk about why leads are getting retired or deleted, why are salespeople getting leads that marketing is ostensibly saying are, qualified leads that are ready to be called by sales. And then why is sales deleting them? This will let us identify maybe holes in the pipeline. Maybe we find out that hey, this webinar is not converting as well as we think it is, or this lead channel is not doing. We find that 60% of our leads that are being deleted are from one channel, so maybe that tells us to reevaluate that lead channel. The other thing it does is it allows the managers to kind of test some different practices out for following up with leads. I'll tell you guys a quick story. I used to work in an organization that would give a double commission to any lead that was closed within 30 days of being retired. So what that means is, let's say that a lead came through from marketing and someone called it for a couple of weeks and wasn't able, said this is a bad lead, there's nothing there, I'm going to delete it and retire it. Those leads would go into a bucket, and then you would have the right, as every other salesperson on the team, right, this lead is not technically in my territory, but it's in the retired bucket. I've got 30 days to try to engage them and get a proposal together. Maybe I know that this sales rep tends to give up on leads in this industry sooner, or maybe I'm at my goal for the month and I'm looking for a way to make some extra money. I'm going to protect my pipeline for the next month or the next quarter. This is just a fun game to play and just say, hey, if these are bad, if these leads are so bad, I'm going to open it up to the whole team and I'm going to double the commission that I'm going to pay out on this lead. This will also let you see maybe which sales reps are retiring leads prematurely. You'll also find that it makes some of your reps more cautious about retiring leads. Maybe they'll call them a few more times that I retire. If I know that I'm going to be paying Stanzie a double commission if I retire this lead, I'm going to be very hesitant to identify it as bad. I may call it a few more times. I may put a little more thought into the emails I sent, just little motivating things like that. So know why your leads are being retired, know which leads are being retired, connect with marketing, and then challenge your sales teams to try to avoid having those leads retired.
Great. That's essentially the end of our presentation portion of the webinar, so we'll open it up to any questions that were submitted.
I've got one that I see here from Jan. Jan Smith, you said, do we feel that by giving them that information you sound like a salesperson? If you wouldn't mind throwing a chat in real quick, and letting us know what you mean by that information, I think we'd be able to answer it. I'll come back to you. Dane, you asked, how assertive can you be with confused buyers? So this was one where we talked about, sort of calling them out on the fact that they might be lying to you. And when we say assertive, I would say, be confident and hold your ground. There's no need to criticize somebody or attack someone. I certainly wouldn't, resort to name calling. I've found that being honest is really helpful in these situations. So what I may say is like, sure, and I'm going to use Dane as an example here. I'm going to say, hey, Dane, I know you probably feel a little bit confused. Let me just tell you, the reason I'm calling you is because you filled out a form on our website. I've got a boss, you've got a boss. My boss is not going to let me stop until I have called you and spoken to you and figured out what caused you to fill out a form on our site, figure out what sort of software problem you're looking to solve. Just know that. Like, that's why I get paid. I don't want to cross a line of professional persistence. That's a line I was taught earlier in my career. You know, I don't want to bug you. The last thing I want to do is be the guy who doesn't know when to stop calling, right? But you know, I know that because you found us through Capterra. I know that because you filled this form on our website. I know that because you spoke with Michael over at Software Advice, that you are looking at least on some level for a solution here. You know, and if there's not a fit, we'll part ways. But I really think it'd be worth our time to spend 15 minutes together. So sort of pulling back the curtain and saying, hey, I'm not calling you because I like to bug people, but I am calling you because it's my job and my company's job to help people solve these types of problems for their businesses. And based on the thousands of people that we've spoken with and the thousands of people that we talk to monthly, you are somebody who probably needs a conversation. So don't be afraid to sort of tell them why you're calling. Don't be afraid to sort of you know, push back and hold your ground a little bit. You know, again, trust that your marketing team is not sending you bad leads, and be willing to go a little harder after those.
So another one from Laura Kelly here is, how do you recommend being persistent with follow-up without bugging the prospect? We get this a lot on the software advice side. One thing, persistence is a tricky line to manage. We always recommend calling at least once or twice a day for 2 weeks and sprinkling that with emails. Some sales teams might see that as a little bit over assertive, but to John's point, the best thing you can do is be completely transparent in why you're calling and your intentions for following up. If you leave a voicemail basically saying, you know, hey, this is the reason I'm calling, Software Advice spoke with you yesterday. They let us know that you were looking for HR software, and we've just been having a hard time connecting, so I wanted to make sure that we get some time on the calendar. Really straightforward, you're really transparent, but it also implies that you're not going to let up until you get some time with them on the phone or via email at least. So there's a way to be persistent without being rude. We usually say something around 2 weeks is a really good time frame to keep kind of working at it, and then you can start placing them in nurturing campaigns if you're not having any luck, but definitely feel free to call and email more than 2 weeks if you think that would pay off.
Sydney asked a question about call to email ratio. On one slide we had talked about that the Software Advice typical ratio is 8 calls to 1 email, and then we spoke about having emails and calls to voicemails being in parallel. Just wanted to clarify that. Our team doesn't leave a voicemail on every call. If I'm into like the second week of trying to talk to somebody and they say, hey, call me Tuesday, let's talk Tuesday, you know, I may call them at 8:30 in the morning. If they don't answer, I'm just going to call them back in a couple of hours. So, you know, we have days where we'll have leads that are at a certain point in our sales process where we're not leaving a voicemail with every call. We're leaving a voicemail like every 4th or 5th call, or we're not sending emails anymore. We're just only calling them. So you know, this is a little bit of a more like advanced sort of sales reach out timing. This is just showing you an idea. You know, salespeople always think they're going to sell by email and say, no, I'm just really good at emails. I'm really good at emails. That's true. You can talk to somebody via email. There are people who like to respond via email, but getting people to talk over the phone is the best way to do it. So, you know, I send an email after every voicemail. Just sometimes email is easiest for people, but if you have a phone desk, if you're carrying a quota at a desk, you need to be using the majority of your outreach on calls. Valerie, yeah, we're gonna have a recording put up probably tomorrow. We're gonna go through and just clear it with our sort of senior people, make sure Stanzie and I are giving away any state secrets that they don't want us posting on the internet. So that'll be going up tomorrow. Stanzie, you want to answer Teresa's question?
Yeah, Teresa, you asked if does Capterra call the prospects to qualify them or just Software Advice? So Capterra did used to have a phone qualified lead program, but that was retired once the Gartner acquisition fully went into effect. So as of right now, Capterra is strictly PPC, so pay-per-click, and Software Advice is PPL, so basically phone qualified leads. Those are the differentiators between our two programs.
Cool, I'm going to go through another few of these here. Bliss, it depends on the industry. It also depends on the person. I don't like to schedule calls in the afternoon. I have all my calls in the morning. So just kind of play around with what works, you know, best for people. I would also ask people like, hey, what's the best time for me to reach you? I'll say that in an email, like, hey, what's the best time for you next week? I'm going to call you on Tuesday, but if Wednesday afternoons are better, let me know. Michael, as far as we know, there are free versions of everything on the helpful tools and apps. People are always looking for ways to make money, so some of those may change from time to time, but the reason that these are listed on here are that for the most part we know free versions, or we at least are using free versions of all of them. Scott, for your question about persistence, Scott asks, are you saying 1 to 2 times per day as they have contact us filled out an online form? Yeah, especially if a lead is hot. So when someone comes through, let's say a Capterra lead comes through, fills out a form on your website, and clicks the button that says, yeah, I'd like to talk to somebody, I would call them right away very quickly. You don't want that lead to go cold. So, for a lead that's sort of new into the pipeline, call them early, call them often. Somebody that you've maybe reached out to for a month or so, you can retire that. Or somebody who says, hey, I'm not going to be making a decision for 6 months, I'll email them weekly. Still want to keep them warm, still want to keep them at arm's length, but for a new lead that comes through, we want to be calling them as often as possible. I think there was one more. Liz asks, at what point do we typically have marketing hand a qualified lead over to sales? Is it at the initial point of contact, or should a more thorough investigation take place? You could get like master's degrees on this topic in terms of where the marketing to sales handoff works best. I think it might be a really good topic for another webinar, which is lead scoring. But what I would say is know what works best for you. So try some things out. Say, hey, we're going to have sales leads call. We're going to have sales call leads that download a white paper right away. We're going to have a different bucket of leads that get called after they download 2 white papers. We're going to call everybody who attends a webinar. We're going to call everybody who has been using the free trial for 30 days. Try some different things out. See what works. Go to sales for some anecdotal feedback and say, hey, when do you think is the best time to call leads? When are the people the most receptive to a sales message? And then you can reverse engineer a marketing plan that works with that. But yeah, that's marketing qualification, pipeline management. I mean, these are really, really heavy concepts that we could probably do a whole other webinar on. But those are just kind of quick tips that you should be able to work with to help. I see a question about just sort of pipeline management in terms of how many leads should I be expecting to convert to opportunities and that kind of stuff. I know on the software advice side, we're consulting with a lot of our clients' sales teams to get this kind of information to sort of find out what people are saying industry-wide. A general rule of thumb is, and this is once a lead converts. So this isn't just like a cold call list that you bought off the internet or got from an events list or something like that. But once a buyer comes to my website, once they fill out a form, anything above 10% is pretty good. So if 10% of the leads that convert through your website become sales opportunities, that's pretty good. And what I mean by opportunities is, a sales rep says, I think I have a 50% chance or better of closing this based on one conversation. That's how we identify an opportunity. If the sales rep is not comfortable assigning like an estimated pipeline value to that, it's probably not ready to be an opportunity. And then from there, the final step is how many, what percentage of my pipeline in terms of the dollar value do I expect to turn into sales? That's honestly dependent on your product, your industry, and your sales team. A really good salesperson will convert about 40 to 50% of their piped opportunities into closed deals. Average is around 20 to 25%. But just to refresh, we see from leads to sales opportunities, 10% is a pretty good metric. Anything over 10% is pretty good. Anything under 5% is probably not great. For third-party lead gen, 5% is okay. But we like to see 10% conversion to opportunity, and then anywhere between 20 to 50% of a close rate from those opportunities. And again, that's dependent on your product and your sales team. Let's see. Do we have any insights into what is going on into the mind and actions of a non-responsive lead? Yeah, I mean, people don't like having salespeople call them sometimes.
If we could answer this question with specificity, that would solve a lot of problems.
I also wouldn't tell any of you guys if I had the answer to this question, because I would just go out of here and get rich. I mean, the reasons are myriad. People, there's a saying that no one likes to be sold, but everyone loves to buy. I always try to remember that. It's likely that we need to tinker with our messaging a little bit, see what people are responding to, Marketing automation software is really great for providing these insights. I can see what open rates and click rates are based on the content of my emails. Bliss asks about the software advice lead qualification process. Don't want to go into too much detail here, but I will say that if you want to email me, we can connect you with our team to talk in more detail about that process. It's just my name, John Leake, JOHNLEAKE at softwareadvice.com. I think it's right here on the page as well. So if you want to connect with somebody at Software Advice to get a more thorough explanation of our process, we're happy to do that. Gene asks the official Software Advice question of, I have a good lead that you sent me, but they're saying that they spoke to Software Advice, and now they're getting calls from a lot of people. What do you suggest we do? Stanzie, I think you probably hear this daily.
Yeah, so hi, Gene. So what we usually suggest here is one of the first things to do is obviously be first. You're not going to hear that as much if you're the first one to quote-unquote bombard them. If you're the first one calling, ostensibly they wouldn't be bombarded just yet. So definitely be first. The second one is to be polite but persistent. So if they tell you, hey, I'm really getting overwhelmed, I really can't handle this right now, definitely be understanding and say, hey, I get it. Sales teams can be a little bit assertive. What's a better time to call you back tomorrow? You don't ask permission, but you are persistent, and you can, again, be honest, and you can tell them, great, I know that you spoke with Ryan yesterday at Software Advice. I understand that he recommended a handful of products. I know that some of those sales teams can call a couple of times a day, so I definitely want to be respectful of your time. What time tomorrow works best, or what time next week works best, and then you can go from there. Just to be kind of transparent on our end, we do verbally recommend each product to a buyer, and we only recommend a maximum of 5 vendors per call. So be comfortable and firm in the knowledge that they might be getting bombarded by calls, but it's likely from only 1 or 2 sales teams. So if they, are telling you that they got 15 calls from 15 different people, definitely feel comfortable in the fact that it's probably a couple of people calling multiple times, and ask for a better time the next, tomorrow when they have a little bit of a cooled off period to wait for those calls to calm down.
Dane tells a story about what we talked about earlier of rerouting through the switchboard, trying to find out who's involved in a certain sales decision, and being criticized by the lead for doing that. How do we deal with that? There's a great book that I really like called The Challenger Sale, and they tell a story about a big research project that a company called the Corporate Executive Board did when they looked at business process buying after the recession in 2008. And one of the things that they found was that more and more companies were moving away from sort of a single point of authority buying model, and everyone was doing what's called consensus buying. The reasons for that are when money is tighter, when people are losing their jobs, when I feel like one bad decision will put my company in trouble. I don't want to be the person who makes that bad decision, so I'm going to recruit a few more people from my team. So I would just say there's the old sales technique that's called feel, felt, found, and you basically just say, hey, listen, for instance, if Stanzie was like, hey, please stop going to the rest of my team, I would say, hey, Stanzie, yeah, I didn't mean to upset you. Always lead with an apology. That's an old Dale Carnegie trick. I didn't mean to upset you, didn't mean to offend you. We see a lot of our clients who are buying through organizations more, buying through groups. Consensus buys are much more common than they were 10 years ago. I didn't know if that was the case here. I hadn't heard from you in a few days, and I didn't want to lose momentum if you guys were up against some sort of really tight deadline or time crunch. I was just seeing who else was involved that I could get some information from. Again, didn't mean to upset you, but just be honest. Not meaning to annoy anybody, not meaning to upset anybody. My job is to help companies solve their software problems, and I thought this was the best way to do that based on my experience. And then the last question goes to a couple of people asking Software Advice specific questions. Again, I would encourage you to email Stanzie or I offline. If you're an existing client, we can probably just connect you to your client rep, and they'll have a better answer for you. I don't want to speak to anyone's business who I'm not working with directly. Gene just says, how many initial calls get voicemails? I think we had that stat that said 90%. So expect to leave a lot of voicemails, get really good at leaving voicemails. And we never heard back from our friend Jan. So I apologize, Jan. If your question is not answered, you can also email me as well. But that's it for us. We'll give everybody a few minutes back to their day. Thank you guys so much for your time. And again, it was our pleasure being on here, and we'll keep you guys posted of new things coming through. And you'll get an email tomorrow with an outline of this as well as a link to a web copy.
Thanks. Bye now.